What are the best rank 1 arcane spells in Pathfinder 2nd edition? Which ones are they? And are these spells rank 1 or just rank? Rank is UK slang for something unpleasant. Like this intro, for example. This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd edition. In this video chapter, I'm going to go over what I believe are the top 20 rank 1 arcane spells. This is part of a series where I'll be slowly and agonizingly going over every ranked spell in every tradition, not elementalist, and picking my favorite 20. There are over 1,500 spells in this beast of a system, and there's no way of me getting around my own personal bias, but I'll try my best to pick spells that I think are actually good as opposed to just ones that I love. If you find this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing. And if you want to support the channel financially, consider joining as a member or becoming a patron. Regardless, your support is always appreciated in ways I cannot explain with my feeble words. But enough nonsense, let's do our best not to fizzle some spells as we cast play music. Yeah, I know it's not an actual spell, but I wanted a slightly cool way to kick off the music, so shut up. Right, so aside from mythic spells, I'll be literally including every type of spell in the system, and they'll be listed in no particular order. At the end, I'll have a runners-up list for spells that didn't quite make my list for whatever reason. I'll be including spells of all rarities from any and all the books, and I'll try to give each spell a type: damage, support, control, debuff, or utility. Some spells will have a mix of multiple of these types. Generally, I'll not be considering which spells make for good wand spells or scroll spells, as there's some spells in this system that aren't all that good for a spell slot but work well on something like a wand, but I'm not interested in that for this list. I'm looking for the best spells for someone who can cast rank 1 spells. I'll be trying my best to vary my spell selections so it's not all damaging spells, so every type of arcane caster can get some use out of this list, and I'm also going to consider how powerful these spells become when they are heightened. But I'm not going to pick spells just because they get really good when heightened. I want the good spells now, please. I may go over some heightening stuff in this video chapter, but I'm not going to be picking spells just because of their heightened effects. Oh, and if I mentioned that a spell is good against bosses, just be careful of the kind of ridiculously high stats for saving throws that bosses do have. For a quick sum up of the arcane tradition, it doesn't tend to have a lot of support spells, but it does focus on damage, control, utility, and debuffs. And it has more spells than any other tradition in the system. That's enough preamble, onto the list itself. Fear is known to be one of the best low-ranked spells in the whole system. This is a 2-action spell with the Concentrate, Emotion, Fear, unsurprisingly, Manipulate, and Mental traits. It targets one creature's will, and on a failed save, the target is Frightened 2, and even on a success, they're Frightened 1. On a crit fail, they're Frightened 3 and fleeing for a whole round. And when it's Frightened to 3rd, yeah, I did mean heightened there, but this sounded cooler, you can target up to 5 creatures. Frightened is simply one of the most powerful debuffs in the whole system, and the fact that even when the enemy succeeds on their save against this spell, they're still Frightened 1, amazing stuff. Lowering practically every stat on an enemy by up to 3 for a single spell slot is extremely worth it, and there's no incapacitation trait here, which makes me think maybe there should be one? So that crit fail could be devastating, even in boss battles. Elysian Whimsy might actually be more hilarious than it is useful. This is a 2-action uncommon spell with the enchantment, incapacitation, and mental trait. It targets one creature's will, and you roll a d4 to determine its effects. On a 1, the target feels an urge to dance and loses 5 feet on its speed, 10 on a crit fail. On a 2, they have to spend an action singing on the next turn, or just babble. On a crit fail, they lose their entire turn to babbling like a moron, like me in this video. On a 3, and I quote, the target is filled with an irresistible urge to support a nearby creature's entertainment career. They have to aid a perform check the nearest creature they can see, and on a crit fail, it loses its entire turn to those aid actions. And on a 4 on the next turn, they have to simply drop some of their wealth, such as coin or jewelry, etc. If it has nothing, it'll spend an action apologizing for not having anything, and on a crit fail, it spends its remaining actions apologizing. I'm sorry, but a creature in the middle of a dangerous fight coming up to you, dropping some money, and then having to apologize to you for not giving more is just utterly hilarious. I can't not pick this spell because it's the dumbest crap I've ever seen in this system, and I love every part of it. First of all, best anime-style magic attack name ever. Horizon Thunder Sphere is 2 to 3 actions and targets 1 creature with a spell attack roll. If you do the 2-action version, it has a range of 30 feet and deals 3d6 electricity damage, and on a crit, this damage is doubled and the creature is dazzled for a round. But if you spend 3 actions casting this spell, it gains a 60-foot range and deals half damage on a failure, which is pretty good for a spell attack roll. But then, you can also choose to spend another 3 actions on your next turn, empowering it, causing it to kaplode, dealing 2d6 electricity damage to all other creatures in a 10-foot emanation with a basic reflex save. And you also deal 1 electricity damage to creatures that grab or hit you with unarmed or non-reach melee weapons. This is quite a varied spell in how you can use it. You can choose to just do the 2-action one, or if you jump it up to the 3-action one, you can pretty much guarantee you're going to do some damage. And if enemies happen to be positioned well, you can spend another 3 actions and make this thing explode and deal even more damage. I do really like spells in this system that have different effects based on the varied action costs. It's kind of like having 3 different spells depending on how you want to cast it, so you're really going to feel like you're getting your money's worth out of a single spell slot. And it heightens every spell rank too. Really cool stuff. Or really shocking stuff. Yeah, I'll let myself out. I'm joking, this one sucks. This spell is on this list because Sickened is a monster of a debuff. Goblin Pox is a 2-action spell with a Concentrate, Disease, and Manipulate traits that targets 1 creature's Fortitude with a range of touch, and if they fail, they are afflicted with Goblin Pox at stage 1, which immediately makes them sickened. And if they carry on failing those saves, they're going to be slowed as well after that turn. If they critically fail, they jump straight to stage 2, immediately coming slowed and losing an action. And even on a success, they are just Sickened 1, meaning that they're going to have to spend an action retching just to get rid of this condition. Sickened, like Frightened, basically just reduces all stats by 1, and getting to do that to a creature even on a success is incredibly strong. And as this spell does not have the incapacitation trait, this is a good contender for boss creatures because they're going to have that permanent -1 to most of their stats unless they lose an action. And who knows, maybe they'll fail the save and lose another action. And when you're in a boss fight, making the enemy lose one of their actions, even if it costs you a couple, is totally worth it because overall you'll have more actions than they will as a group. Their actions are a lot more valuable than yours are. Obviously the downside is having to be in touch range for this spell, but otherwise it's pretty phenomenal. This spell is another classic, pretty useful all-around damaging spell with the old name being Burning Hands. Breathe Fire is a 2-action spell with a Concentrate, Fire, and Manipulate trait that targets basic reflexes and has a 15-foot cone for its area. It deals 2d6 of fire damage to creatures who fail the reflex save, and obviously that will be half if they succeed. Cone spells are definitely more situational than some of the other area-based spells, but when those situations arise, you can hit quite a few creatures with one of them. And while fire spells are resisted by a decent chunk of enemies in this system, this is still just a classic and rather strong spell to use. I do indeed recommend it to those wanting to blast some creatures with a cone spell. This is another very popular spell, usually among the Magus, but can be utilized rather well for wizards and the like also. Sure Strike is a 1-action spell that targets yourself. It basically means that when you do an attack roll, you have to roll twice and use the better result, and ignore circumstance penalties or any flat checks required due to concealment or hidden. You're immune to it for 10 minutes after casting this spell, which is its biggest disadvantage, but otherwise this is a great spell if you're going to be using attack rolls or spell attack rolls at any point. This spell is another one of those classic spells that everyone knows about, with its old name being Magic Missile. Oh crap. Is that the Pinkertons at the door? Force Barrage is a 1 to 2 to 3 action spell with a Concentrate, Force, and Manipulate traits that targets 1 creature with a range of 120 feet. This spell is rather unique in that it cannot miss unless the creature uses the shield spell. That is it. It automatically hits and it's going to deal 1d4 plus 1 force damage for each action you use to cast this. And every 2 spell ranks that you heighten it, it'll shoot an additional shard with each action you spend. That damage may only be a small amount, but honestly, it kind of ramps up, and considering that it cannot miss, and it's a force spell, which tends to be barely ever resisted in this system, it's quite powerful indeed. The best thing about this spell is that if you're fighting a strong creature and it's almost down but everyone keeps missing, you could just finish it off with something like this. No worries about missing and stuff. Great spell, highly recommend it. This is another very solid damaging spell. Thunderstrike is a 2-action spell with Concentrate, Electricity, Manipulate, and Sonic traits. It targets one creature with a basic reflex save and has a range of 120 feet. The damage with this spell is pretty decent, 1d12 electricity and 1d4 sonic damage, and if they're wearing metal armor, they take a -1 circumstance bonus to the save and a clumsy 1 if damaged by the spell. This heightens really well with another d12 and d4 of damage for every spell rank, and honestly, it's just overall a really good spell. It's not an unbelievable amount of damage, but it's pretty significant, and it's not a spell attack roll, which means that it's going to do half damage if they succeed at that save, and the fact that it has 120 foot range is just icing on the cake. Just overall a solid damaging spell for single target. Now, I'm grouping together all of the different summoning spells, summon undead, construct, or animal, because they more or less do the same thing, and there's a very large list of creatures to look down for each spell rank you decide to cast this at, and it's always worth making a short list of the best ones if you do take one of these spells. A lot of people are not big fans of summoning spells. They take your whole turn to cast, but then your summon does get 2 actions of their own immediately. But honestly, I think they get a bad rep when they can be incredibly powerful when used correctly. Remember that there is no saving throw on these spells, and you can position them within 30 feet. And every time you sustain them for 1 action each turn, your minion will get 2 actions for themselves, which they can do their special abilities with, and maybe just move to help flank, or maybe even take 1 or 2 hits from the enemy. At that point, you're reducing the enemy's actions, which is always an amazing thing, especially when there was no saving throw. Obviously, your GM's got to play ball and actually try attacking the thing that you summoned, and I find that most GMs will probably do that, but overall, I do think these spells are absolutely worth looking into. I personally love summoning an animated broom with Summon Construct because they can potentially make an enemy lose an action if they hit on their turn. That's because the bristles are dusty bristles, which is kind of funny and weird and awesome. And with Summon Undead, you can summon a predatory rabbit. And I mean, it's a predatory rabbit. Do I need to say any more? It's just amazing. And obviously, heightening these spells means you get to summon more powerful creatures. I think they do trail off as you level up, because the creatures are always a few levels below you, but still, they're pretty cool when utilized correctly. Everyone's favourite bodily fluid. That's disgusting. Grease is a 2-action spell with the Concentrate and Manipulate trait that has a range of 30 feet, lasts for a minute, and has you pick 4 contiguous 5-foot squares or an object of 1 bulk or less. If you choose the area version, then any creature standing on the surface has to make an acrobatics check against your spell DC or fall prone, and any creature that moves onto the surface has to balance, and if they fail that, they basically lose the action or fall prone and lose the rest of their turn. They can step or crawl to avoid having to make that save. Obviously, this is a bit of an issue when you're casting this near your allies, but if you coordinate well, this can be incredibly strong. And that's because the prone condition is very strong indeed. They're off guard and they take a minus to their attack rolls. If you target an enemy's weapon with this spell, they have to make a reflex save, and if they fail, they take a -2 penalty to all checks with that object. And on a crit fail, they lose the item. This is like a crazy powerful disarm. If you cast this on a worn object, like armor, the wearer gains +2 circumstance bonus to fortitude saves against attempts to grapple them. It's quite a very versatile spell, honestly. It allows you to do lots of things with it. And honestly, I really do recommend it, especially considering it lasts a whole minute. Very cool stuff. Another one of the classically well-known spells. Charm is a 2-action spell that has the Concentrate, Emotion, Incapacitation, Manipulate, Mental, and Subtle trait, and it targets one creature's will with a range of 30 feet and lasts for an hour. On a fail, the target becomes friendly towards you, and if it was friendly, it becomes helpful and cannot use hostile actions against you. On a critical fail, they become helpful towards you immediately. This is more of an out-of-combat spell, because if you try to cast it in combat, the creature gets a +4 circumstance bonus to their save. So in that case, you're better off doing this for like merchants when you're trying to negotiate better prices, or maybe if the guards catch you doing something illegal, you can cast the spell on them, etc. It's useful in lots of different situations, and I think overall it's a very good utility spell. This spell has a funny name, unlike the name of my channel. Befuddle is a 2-action spell with the Concentrate, Emotion, Manipulate, and Mental trait that targets one creature with a will save and has a range of 30 feet and lasts for 1 round. On a failure, the creature is Clumsy 2 and Stupefied 2. And on a success, they're Clumsy 1 and Stupefied 1. On a crit fail, Clumsy 3, Stupefied 3, and Confused. And Confused is very, very powerful. And this does not have the Incapacitation trait. Clumsy reduces AC, and if they're a spellcaster as well, that Stupefied's really gonna hurt. Honestly, this is a very strong debuff spell. Biggest downside is the fact that it only lasts for a round, but oh well. This is another action removing spell, and we all love them. Command is a 2-action spell with the Auditory, Concentrate, Linguistic, Manipulate, and Mental traits. It targets one creature with a will save within 30 feet and lasts until the end of the target's next turn. You basically tell a creature to do a thing, and it kind of has to do that thing. There's a list of a few options that it can do, but ultimately it's just going to lose an action doing one of these commands. You can tell it to run away, which is probably one of the best things to do because it has to run back to you. You can tell it to release what it's holding, drop prone, or even just stand in place. On a crit fail, it has to use all of its actions on its next turn to obey your command. When this is heightened to 5th rank, you can target up to 10 creatures with it. That's so strong. Imagine that you just stood there and then 10 creatures all just like drop prone or immediately leg it from you. Amazing. Very interesting spell, and there's no incapacitation trait here, so you can potentially use this on bosses. This one also has a funny name, because whoever uses the word enfeeble, my arms feel enfeebled today. Never happens, although I do like the words feebled. Like anything that's got feeble in it sounds funny. Feebled. Enfeeble is a 2-action spell with the Concentrate and Manipulate trait that targets one creature with a Fortitude save within 30 feet. On a fail, the target is Enfeebled 2 for 1 minute, which basically means that if they're strength based, they're going to take a penalty to their attack rolls, etc. And that's for a whole minute. It's quite a long time. It's like when you try to have a conversation with me, it just feels like it lasts forever. On a success, they're Enfeebled 1 until the start of your next turn, which isn't amazing, but on a crit fail, they're Enfeebled 3 for a whole minute. Again, that is basically the whole fight. This is a pure debuff spell that saps away the target's strength, and it's just really good at what it does. I like this spell, and that's why it's on this list. Jump is a 1-action spell with the Manipulate and Move trait. Basically, you just jump 30 feet in any direction without touching the ground. And when you heighten it to 3rd, you can give the spell to a creature and it lasts for a minute. Honestly, this is just really good for sort of skill challenges and the like. If you need to jump up 30 feet, you need to climb up like a sheer cliff or something, then you can use this spell. If you need to jump over a broken bridge or whatever, this is the spell for you. It'll make low-level athletics users cry a little bit. And screw those guys, they're probably jocks anyway, and nerds are supreme. This is a great spell for crowd control when used correctly. Draw Ire is a 2-action spell with the Emotion, Enchantment, and Mental traits that targets one creature with a will save within 120 feet. And thank goodness it's 120 feet, because on a fail they take 1d10 mental damage and take a -1 status penalty to attack rolls against creatures other than you for a whole minute. On a success, they take half damage and the spell ends at the end of the creature's next turn. On a crit fail, they take double damage and take a -2 to those attack rolls, and this heightens every spell rank for 1d10 damage. So this is kind of a slightly self-sacrificial spell, so you gotta be clever on how you use it, but considering it's 120 feet, you just cast this on an enemy and then run for the hills while your allies beat up the guy that's chasing you. It's great when used in the correct situations. No incapacitation trade again, so maybe on bosses, but then maybe not, because they might like one-shot you or something. I don't know, it's a cool way to go out. This is always roleplayed as a giant fart or burp, and if your group doesn't do that, then they're the weird ones. Gust of Wind is a 2-action spell with the Air, Concentrate, and Manipulate trait that has a 60-foot line and targets Fortitude. I bet it does. Basically, if they fail that stinky save and they are large or smaller, they're going to be knocked prone. If they're flying, they jump straight to the critical failure effect, which is they're pushed 30 feet in the wind's direction and knocked prone. And they take 2d6 bludgeoning damage. Also, they smell like poopy. On a success, they cannot move against the wind, because the thing about this spell is it lasts until the start of your next turn, so it stays there all throughout this time. We all know what dodgy farts are like. Obviously, this could be an issue for your allies, especially if they have sensitive noses, but once again, you just got to be clever about how you use this. This can literally stop creatures getting towards you if done in like a tight corridor where your allies batter them with ranged attacks, etc., while holding their nose. It's situational, but strong. It's like me. I'm situationally strong against situations like arm wrestling a baby. Another lovely utility spell that can be used in lots of different situations. Illusory Object is a 2-action spell with the Concentrate, Illusion, Manipulate, and Visual traits with a range of 500 feet, and it's a 20-foot burst and lasts for 10 minutes. This is going to be one of those spells that's used to trick and fool creatures. They can use the Seek action to attempt to disbelieve your illusion, but otherwise it looks pretty normal and animates naturally. It doesn't make any sound or smells, which is good because we just dealt with that, but it looks pretty good, and when you heighten it to 2nd, it does make sounds and smells and feels right to the touch, and it lasts for an hour. Heightened to 5th, it lasts forever and ever and ever. Again, like a conversation with me. How many self-deprecating jokes have I had in this one? Because it feels like a lot. Anyway, this is honestly a pretty cool spell when you need to distract your enemies, and I'm sure there's a million other situations where you could make use out of it. A pure debuff spell. Dizzying Colors is a 2-action spell with a concentrate, illusion, incapacitation, manipulate, and visual traits. It's a 15-foot cone and targets will, and it lasts for 1 or more rounds depending on how well they do on their saves. On a fail, the enemies in that cone are stunned 1 and blinded 1 for a whole round, then dazzled for a whole minute. And on a crit fail, they're blinded for that whole minute. On a success, they're just dazzled for 1 round, which can still be useful, especially considering this is a cone. Stunned means they lose an action, and blinded obviously means they are blind, which is amazing, and dazzled is still pretty good because it gives them a 25% chance to not be able to hit anyone with one of their actions. And it lasts up to a minute, which is pretty cool. It's a very good debuff area of effect spell. Last but not least, Hydraulic Push is a 2-action spell with the attack, concentrate, manipulate, and water traits that targets 1 creature or an unattended object with a range of 60 feet. If you hit an enemy with this, it deals 3d6 bludgeoning damage and knocks them back 5 feet, and on a crit success, it's 6d6 bludgeoning damage and they're knocked back 10 feet, and it heightens with another 2d6 every spell rank. It's somewhat situational, but you could potentially make an enemy lose an action, especially if you kind of work with one of your allies, such as the fighter that has reactive strike, and force them to be next to the fighter when they don't want to attack them, and then when they move, boom. Plus, it does a bit of extra damage, which is always nice, and you can potentially knock them off the edge of a cliff or something with this. Lots of use cases for this, and the damage is just the cherry on top. Right, that was the main list, so let's take a brief look at some of the runners-up. I do have quite a lot because Arcane has an unbelievable amount of awesome spells in its list, so let's quickly dive in. Tailwind. Now, I do not like this spell because people just end up putting it on wands once they get money for it at like certain levels for the 2nd rank version, and then it basically lasts for a whole day and gives people a plus 10 foot status bonus to the speeds. And I don't like free movement speed just for a bit of money. It seems a little bit silly. It's kind of like pre-buffing, and PF2E tried to get rid of pre-buffing. I actually homebrewed this so that the normal version only lasts 10 minutes, and when you heighten it to 2nd, it lasts for 1 hour, and that's that. I think Fleet Step is much more interesting instead, as it only lasts a minute, but it gives you 30-foot speed. But that's my opinion on Tailwind. A Gentle Landing. This one is a reaction and can save your bacon, and will do so on more than 1 occasion. There's lots of times we end up falling off cliffs and stuff and making a complete idiot of ourselves, and this is just going to negate that damage. Can be useful. Sleep. This one's kind of rubbish when you use it at lower levels, but when you heighten it, it does become quite useful indeed. Deja Vu. This is incredibly situational, but you could potentially get an enemy to repeat their movement so they walk off a cliff or something. It's unbelievably situational, but if you're really clever and really tactical, you can make tremendous use out of this spell. Runic Weapon / Runic Body, Conductive Weapon, Mystic Armor, etc. All the buffing spells that give you sort of boosted damage or armor or whatever. They're pretty good, they're useful, they trail off, but then they heighten again. Just keep an eye out for them. There's quite a lot of them, hence why I didn't include them in this list, because they're all pretty similar, but they can be quite useful. Leaden Steps is a pretty interesting spell. If they fail their saving throw, they are encumbered, and encumbered's a pretty good debuff, and they have a weakness 2 to electricity as well. Shattering Gem. I do like this one because it basically gives an ally a little bit of extra HP in a way, and then it stabs an enemy and blows up in their face when they lose that extra HP. Signal Skyrocket is actually pretty decent and it sounds amazing. You literally shoot up a rocket and that's awesome. Fail effect is pretty good too. This one's just kind of a crazy one, but it actually does have some good uses as well. Lastly, Ventriloquism, because it's quite similar to Illusory Object, but it's more like the sound version of it. Could be useful indeed. Okay, that is the end of my list of the top 20 rank 1 Arcane spells and my runners-up. There was quite a lot to go through. The Arcane tradition is a bit of a behemoth, so please let me know in the comments what your favorite Arcane spells are and if I missed any. I'm more than happy to hear other people's suggestions. There's quite a lot to choose from, so I'm sure I missed at least a couple. If you found this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing, etc. And there's links in the description if you'd like to support the channel financially. As ever, I would like to thank my members and archivist Max Magnus 20019, Aussie Smith and Shard, and thanks to my patron and archivist Clash. I really appreciate the support. But for now, this is Dominic of the Dominomicon, wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.